Nia never planned to fall for a stranger. She never planned to carry his children, and she definitely never planned to find out he was one of the most powerful men in the country. Hello, family. Before we begin this life-changing journey, tell me, could you forgive yourself for one night that changed everything if it brought you the greatest love of your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like, share with someone who believes in destiny. And in case you haven't subscribed yet, here at Narrative Jar, we bring you the most extraordinary love stories in the world. Now, let's begin. Nia Calloway had always been the cautious one. At 32, she lived her life with precision, every detail planned, every decision calculated. As a successful architect in Manhattan, she built homes, not chaos. She designed perfection, not passion. Her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building overlooked the city she'd helped reshape with her innovative designs. The walls were lined with awards, architectural magazines featuring her work, and photographs of completed projects that bore her signature sustainable approach. She was known in the industry as the woman who never missed a deadline, never went over budget, and never ever made impulsive decisions. Her apartment in Soho reflected this same meticulous nature. Every piece of furniture had been carefully selected, every color coordinated, every surface free of clutter. Her calendar was color-coded, her meals planned a week in advance, and her 5-year career plan updated quarterly. But that October night, everything changed. She was celebrating the biggest contract of her career. Her firm had just been selected to design an entire eco-housing development worth $50 million. The project would span 3 years and establish her as one of the premier sustainable architects in the country. She'd worked 18-hour days for 3 months to win this contract, surviving on coffee and determination. Her best friend Talia wouldn't take no for an answer about celebrating. "Tonight, you're drinking, you're dancing, and you're not thinking about blueprints or building codes," Talia declared, practically dragging Nia from her apartment. "When's the last time you went out? And I mean really went out, not those stuffy industry networking events." Nia couldn't remember. Work had consumed her life so completely that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just live. The rooftop bar was exclusive, the kind of place where Manhattan's elite gathered to see and be seen. Skyloft had a 3-month waiting list and a dress code that required designer labels. Nia felt out of place in her deep red dress, the only somewhat daring piece in her conservative wardrobe, nursing a glass of wine while Talia worked the room with her usual magnetic confidence. The October air was crisp, and the city sparkled beneath them like a circuit board of dreams and ambition. Nia found herself drawn to the edge of the terrace, away from the crowd, looking down at the streets where people lived their real lives. Then she saw him. A tall, commanding man, in a dark tailored suit, stood at the bar. He didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. There was something magnetic about him, a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and when he turned to scan the room, she caught a glimpse of tired eyes that held secrets. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, and somehow that made him more beautiful. When their eyes met across the crowded space, time seemed to slow. The sounds of conversation and clinking glasses faded into background noise. He didn't smile immediately, just studied her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but instead felt like recognition. He approached with a confidence that should have intimidated her, but instead felt like coming home. "You look like you're celebrating something," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I am," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. "And you look like you're running from something." He smiled, genuinely amused. "Perceptive. I'm Xavier." "Nia." He bought her a drink. They talked about architecture, about dreams, about the weight of expectations. She didn't know his last name. She didn't know he was worth billions. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Hours passed like minutes. When he asked if she wanted to get out of there, she didn't hesitate. The hotel suite was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she'd helped shape. But all she could focus on was the man beside her, the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. They made love that night with a passion that surprised them both, not just physical but emotional, soul deep. like two people who'd been searching for each other their entire lives. In the early hours of morning, when he kissed her forehead and whispered, "I hope I see you again," she knew she'd made a memory she'd never forget. But she also knew it was just one night. She slipped out while he slept, leaving no trace except the lingering scent of her perfume. 6 weeks later, everything changed again. The morning sickness started subtly, fatigue that her demanding schedule couldn't explain, nausea that came in waves, usually triggered by the smell of her favorite coffee. She blamed it on stress from her new project, the endless client meetings, the pressure of designing something that would impact hundreds of lives. But when she fainted on site during a client meeting, her concerned assistant rushed her to the clinic. "Mrs. Calloway." The nurse's voice seemed to come from far away as Nia struggled to focus. "We'd like to run some tests, just to be safe." An hour later, Nia sat in the small examination room, her hands folded tightly in her lap, waiting for results that would explain her symptoms. "Congratulations," the nurse said with a bright smile. "You're pregnant." Nia nearly fell off the examination table. That's impossible. "And from the looks of your ultrasound, you're carrying 3. Triplets." The room spun. She gripped the edges of the paper-covered table, trying to process what she'd just heard. "Are you sure?" The nurse turned the monitor toward her, pointing to the grainy black and white image on the screen. 3 distinct heartbeats. You're about 8 weeks along. Can you see them there?" Nia stared at the ultrasound. 3 tiny shadows that would change her life forever. She thought of Xavier, of that one perfect night, of a man whose last name she didn't even know. The man who'd made her feel alive, who'd given her the most beautiful night of her life, and who was now going to be the father of her children. How do you tell someone you can't find that they're about to become a father of 3? She drove home in a daze, the ultrasound photos burning a hole in her purse. Her neat, organized life suddenly felt like a house of cards in a hurricane. Every carefully laid plan, every calculated decision, every controlled aspect of her existence had just been swept away by something as simple and profound as life itself. That night, she sat on her perfectly arranged couch, staring at the photos, running her fingers over the images of her babies. Fear and wonder warred in her chest. She was successful, independent, financially stable. She could do this alone. She had to do this alone. Meanwhile, across the city, Xavier Knight hadn't stopped thinking about her. Xavier Knight, CEO of Knight Development Group, billionaire, bachelor. A man whose business decisions affected thousands of jobs, whose real estate empire stretched across 3 continents, whose name appeared on Forbes lists and in financial headlines. He'd tried to find Nia, but he had no last name, no number, just the name of the bar where they met and the memory of the most incredible night of his life. His security team had run discreet inquiries, but Manhattan had thousands of architects, and Nia was too common a name without a surname to narrow the search. For 3 months, he'd found himself distracted in board meetings, thinking about her laugh, the way she'd challenged him, the way she'd made him feel human again. His assistant had noticed his unusual distraction, his tendency to stare out the window during conference calls, the way he'd started leaving the office earlier, as if he were searching for something in the city streets. His empire was built on real estate, luxury developments and legacy projects. Knight Development Group had transformed skylines from New York to Dubai. But something about her had stayed with him, haunting his days and filling his dreams. The way she looked at him like a man, not a brand name. The way she'd talked about her work with such passion, such purpose. The way she'd made him remember what it felt like to connect with someone beyond business transactions and strategic partnerships. After months of searching, he gave up. Some things, he told himself, were meant to be just beautiful memories. He threw himself back into work, closing deals that would have excited him before, but now felt hollow. Until he saw her again. It was a Tuesday in March, 7 months after their night together. Xavier was exiting the Presbyterian Hospital after reviewing plans for a new medical center expansion, a project that would bring cutting-edge healthcare to an underserved community. He was walking toward his car, his mind already moving to the next meeting, when he saw her. Nia was walking slowly toward the building, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other resting on a very pregnant belly. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore a flowing dress in soft blue that couldn't hide her condition. She was glowing. Their eyes met across the parking lot. Time stopped. The sounds of traffic and city life faded away, leaving only the thundering of his heart and the impossible reality of seeing her again. "Nia?" She froze, her face cycling through shock, fear, and something that might have been relief. "Xavier." He walked toward her, his legs feeling unsteady, his eyes inevitably drawn to her belly. His mind raced, calculating dates, possibilities, probabilities. The timeline fit perfectly. The night they'd spent together would have been exactly when... "Are you—" He couldn't finish the question. She nodded slowly, her hand moving protectively over her stomach. 6 months along. "Are they mine?" The question hung in the air between them. A few hospital visitors passed by, but they might as well have been alone in the world. She studied his face, searching for signs of anger, rejection, the accusations she'd been dreading. "Yes." He ran a hand through his hair, his carefully controlled world tilting on its axis. "How many?" 3. His knees nearly buckled. "Triplets." She nodded again, watching his face carefully. Instead of the anger or fear she'd expected, she saw something that took her breath away. Joy. Pure, stunned, overwhelming joy. "My God, Nia. 3 babies." He stepped closer, his eyes bright with wonder. "Are you okay? Are they okay? Do you need anything? Are you getting good care? Is there anything I can do?" The questions tumbled out of him, and she felt tears prick her eyes. This wasn't how she'd imagined this conversation would go. She'd prepared for rejection, for demands for proof, for accusations and anger. "I'm fine. We're fine. I didn't know how to find you." "You didn't need to find me," he said gently. "I should have found you first. I tried, but I didn't have your last name and—" "Knight," she whispered, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. "You're Xavier Knight." His expression shifted, becoming cautious. "You know who I am?" "I know of you," she said slowly. "Your company designed half the buildings I see from my apartment window." They stood there in the parking lot, 2 people whose lives had just collided again, surrounded by the weight of possibility and responsibility and the dawning realization that their one night together had been between 2 of the city's most successful architects and developers. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Really talk?" She nodded, and he helped her into his car, his hand gentle on her elbow. They drove to a quiet cafe nearby, where he ordered her decaf coffee and insisted she eat something, his protective instincts already kicking in. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." She did. The morning sickness, the shock of the diagnosis, the fear of raising 3 babies alone. She told him about the sleepless nights, the financial planning, the nursery she'd started setting up in her 1-bedroom apartment. She told him about the loneliness, the way she'd wanted to share the excitement of feeling them move, but had no one to tell. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening when she mentioned going to appointments alone, relaxing when she talked about feeling the babies move for the first time. "I want to be involved," he said finally. "I want to be their father." "You don't even know me," she protested. "We spent 1 night together." "Then let's change that," he said simply. "Let's get to know each other. Let's do this right." Over the next 3 months, they did exactly that. Xavier backed off the immediate pressure, the offers to move her into his penthouse, the attempts to manage every aspect of her pregnancy. Instead, he showed up. He came to doctor's appointments, sitting quietly in the corner while she got ultrasounds, his eyes fixed on the screen with wonder every time they heard the heartbeats. He learned to ask questions, to advocate for her comfort, to celebrate each milestone. He researched pregnancy nutrition obsessively and started bringing her carefully planned meals when she was too tired to cook. Not expensive catered affairs, but home-cooked meals he'd learned to make, simple comfort foods that settled her stomach and nourished their babies. He assembled the cribs in her apartment, cursing creatively at the incomprehensible instructions, while she laughed from her spot on the couch, her belly too big now to be much help. They spent evenings talking, really talking, about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears about parenthood. She learned that Xavier had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes, that his drive for success came from a deep need to never be powerless again, to never have to depend on anyone else's charity or kindness. He learned that she'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 22, that her careful planning came from a fear of life's unpredictability, her need to control every detail, a way of protecting herself from the chaos that had once torn her world apart. "I'm scared," she admitted one night, her hand resting on her enormous belly. At 32 weeks, she felt like she was carrying a small planet. "What if I'm not good at this? What if I mess them up?" "You won't," he said, moving closer on the couch. "You're already the best mother they could ask for." "How do you know?" "Because you're putting them first. Because you're thinking about what they need, not what's convenient for you. Because you're already making sacrifices, already planning for their future." She leaned into him, feeling safe for the first time in months. "What if we mess this up? Us, I mean. What if we try to be together and it doesn't work?" "Then we'll figure it out," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Together. But separate or together, we're going to be amazing parents." The babies came early, as multiples often do. At 34 weeks, Nia woke up in the middle of the night with contractions that took her breath away. She lay in bed for several minutes, timing them, hoping they would stop. They didn't. Xavier's phone rang at 2 a.m. "It's time," she gasped into the phone, another contraction stealing her breath. He was at her apartment in 15 minutes, finding her doubled over in pain, her overnight bag clutched in her hands. "It's too early," she cried as he helped her to the car. "They're not ready. 34 weeks is too early." "They're ready," he said firmly, though his own heart was racing. "They're strong, like their mother, and we're going to the best hospital in the city." The delivery was a blur of doctors, nurses, and machines. Nia gripped Xavier's hand so tightly she left marks, but he never complained. He whispered encouragement, wiped her forehead, and stayed exactly where she needed him. "I can see the first one," Dr. Martinez announced. "One more push, Nia." Aria came first, tiny but fierce, announcing her arrival with a strong cry that filled the room. At 4 pounds, 2 ounces, she was small but perfect, her dark hair damp against her head, her fists waving in indignation at this bright, cold world. Zayn followed 3 minutes later, quiet and observant, his dark eyes already taking in his new world. He was the biggest at 4 pounds, 8 ounces, and he seemed to study everything with serious concentration. Nova was last, the smallest of the three at 3 pounds, 15 ounces, but with a grip that made the nurses laugh when she wrapped her tiny fingers around the doctor's thumb. "They're perfect," Xavier whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his children for the first time. 3 tiny humans who were half him, half the woman he'd fallen in love with in a single night. Nia was exhausted, but radiant, her hair plastered to her head, her face glowing with joy and relief. "We did it," she said softly. "You did it," he corrected. "You're incredible." The babies spent 2 weeks in the NICU, growing stronger every day. It was a difficult time, filled with monitors and feeding tubes and the constant low-level anxiety that came with having premature babies. But it was also magical, watching these tiny humans develop their personalities, learning to be parents together. Xavier and Nia took turns holding them, feeding them, reading to them. They learned to work as a team, anticipating each other's needs, sharing the exhaustion and the joy. Xavier would arrive at the hospital with coffee and breakfast, having learned exactly how Nia liked her eggs. Nia would have updates on each baby's progress, having spent the night memorizing their charts. Aria was the fighter, always ready to eat, always alert, always demanding attention. Zayn was the observer, content to watch the world, calm and steady. Nova was the charmer, with a smile that came early and a way of looking at people that made them melt. "They're so different already," Nia marveled one afternoon, watching Aria fuss in her incubator while Zayn slept peacefully and Nova gripped her finger with surprising strength. "They're individuals," Xavier said, wonder in his voice. "3 separate people we get to know." It was during one of these quiet moments, watching Nia sing softly to Nova while Arya and Zane slept in their incubators, that Xavier knew he couldn't imagine his life without any of them. 2 weeks after bringing the babies home, Nia walked into the nursery to find Xavier down on one knee beside the 3 cribs. The babies were sleeping finally, after a particularly challenging evening of feeding and diaper changes. "Xavier, we made magic in one night," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We made life. We made a family I never knew I needed." He pulled out a ring, simple but elegant, a solitaire surrounded by 3 smaller stones that caught the soft light from the nursery lamp. "Let me spend forever making you feel safe, making you feel loved, making you feel like the incredible woman you are. Will you marry me?" She looked at him. This man who'd started as a stranger and become her anchor, her partner, her love. She looked at their 3 beautiful children, sleeping peacefully in their cribs, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise of their future together. They married 6 months later in a private garden ceremony at the Botanical Garden, where they'd had their first official date. The venue was intimate, filled with white roses and soft music. Just their closest friends and colleagues gathered to witness their vows. The triplets, now sitting up on their own, wore matching white outfits and babbled happily throughout the ceremony. Arya tried to grab the officiant's microphone, Zane studied the assembled guests with serious concentration, and Nova charmed everyone with her infectious giggles. "You are my greatest adventure," Xavier said in his vows, his voice carrying across the small gathering. "You and these 3 incredible children are my home, my purpose, my future." "You taught me that the best things in life can't be planned," Nia replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "You taught me that love is worth the risk, that family is worth everything." Nia designed their dream home, a sprawling family house in Westchester, with a studio for her work and a playground in the backyard. Xavier built there forever, creating a foundation of love and security that would shelter their growing family. The house was everything they'd dreamed of and more. High ceilings and large windows that let in natural light, a kitchen designed for family meals and homework sessions, a library where they could read to the children, and a master suite that was their private sanctuary. Xavier's business continued to thrive, but he structured his schedule around family time. He was home for dinner, present for bedtime stories, and available for middle-of-the-night feeding duties. He'd learned that success meant nothing without people to share it with. Nia's career reached new heights as she became known for her innovative, family-friendly designs. Her work was featured in magazines and she was invited to speak at conferences around the world. But she never forgot what mattered most, and she designed her schedule around school plays and soccer games and family vacations. The triplets grew into distinct personalities. Arya became a leader, always organizing her siblings, always ready for the next adventure. Zane became the thinker, lost in books and puzzles, quietly observing the world around him. Nova became the heart of the family, the one who could make anyone smile, who seemed to understand people's feelings before they did. And every night before they fell asleep, Xavier kissed Nia's hand and whispered, "Thank you for saying yes." "To the proposal?" she'd ask, smiling. "To everything," he'd reply. "To that first night, to letting me in, to building this life with me." She'd curl into his arms, listening to the soft sounds of their children sleeping down the hall, and whisper back, "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for letting me." Sometimes the greatest love stories don't start with promises. They start with a chance, a moment, a choice to trust in something bigger than fear. And sometimes, one night can change everything. 5 years later, they would add 2 more children to their family. Twins this time, planned and anticipated and welcomed with the same joy and wonder. The house would grow louder and more chaotic, filled with laughter and arguments and the beautiful mess of a large family. Xavier would teach their children about business and ambition, but also about kindness and responsibility. Nia would show them how to build things that last, how to create beauty in the world, how to leave everything better than they found it. And they would tell their children the story of how they met, how one night of following their hearts instead of their heads had given them the greatest gift of all, each other. Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your life's direction? If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Share it with someone who believes in destiny. And don't forget to subscribe to Narrative Jar for more unforgettable journeys of love, hope, and the magic that happens when two hearts find their way home.